Hi everyone, we're Group 2, and today we'll be discussing the real-world impact of market concentration. More specifically, we're going to be talking about the consequences and impacts of trends in competition and monopoly power, as well as the possible policy responses and how it affects several factors. Now moving into how the effects of market concentration and monopoly power affects consumers. Consumers often face higher prices because dominant firms have increased pricing power due to less competition. This means they can charge more without losing many customers. Additionally, consumers may see less choice and less innovation if large firms feel less pressure to compete aggressively. However, there are exceptions. Some sectors with network effects, like social media platforms or marketplaces, might actually provide greater convenience or value through scale. But still, the overall impact on consumers tends to be negative when market power goes unchecked. Now, on to how this impacts workers. For workers, rising market concentration usually leads to stagnant or declining wages. Firms with significant market power can suppress wage growth because workers have fewer alternative employers. This concentration can also reduce job opportunities as less competition limits industry dynamism and business formation. While high-skilled workers at dominant firms may earn well, this contributes to growing income inequality, as many lower and middle income workers see little wage growth. As for how this impacts investors, investors often benefit from rising monopoly power through higher corporate profits and more predictable returns from dominant firms. Concentration can create stable, profitable companies that attract investment. However, this concentration can also bring regulatory risks, since governments may step in to curb monopoly power. Investors keep a close eye on these potential policy changes, which can affect company valuations and returns. Lastly, for how this impacts citizens and society, at the societal level, rising market power can impact tax revenues, as large firms may use strategies to reduce taxable income, which affects public budgets. Economic inequality widens because workers' share of income declines, while returns to capital increases. Reduced competition can slow economic growth and innovation, harming long-term prosperity. And lastly, the political influence of dominant firms raises concerns about their ability to shape policies and regulations in their favor, potentially undermining democratic processes. Now Maya will talk about whether or not policy intervention is justified.
Thanks, Purvi. So, after seeing the wide-ranging impacts of market concentration on consumers, workers, and society, the natural next question is, do these effects justify stronger government action? While some argue that big firms are just more efficient, the real concern is when that size is used to block competition. We've seen higher prices, fewer choices, and declining labor share. These aren't just theoretical harms, they're showing up in real economic outcomes. That's where antitrust enforcement comes in. It's not just about punishing success, it's about protecting fair competition and ensuring that the next generation of innovators actually has a shot. On to the next slide. One major example of this is the antitrust case the Department of Justice filed against Google. The DOJ claims that Google used its financial power to block out search engine competition, primarily by paying companies like Apple to make Google the default search engine on nearly all smartphones and browsers. In 2021 alone, Google spent over 26 billion on these kinds of default agreements. That investment pays off. Today, Google controls around 90% of the global search engine market. And that dominance isn't just because people prefer Google. It's because most users don't change their default. So even if a competitor has a better product, they'd never get the visibility they need to grow. This kind of behavior raises big red flags. It's a classic example of how a firm can use scale and money, not just quality, to protect its monopoly. The case illustrates exactly why strong antitrust laws exist, to stop companies from using their dominance to shut down meaningful competition before it can even begin. And finally, on to the next one. Do we need stronger enforcement? The answer is yes, but it should be thoughtful and targeted. Not all big firms are abusive, but when they use their power to close off markets, that's a real threat to innovation and fairness. Antitrust should focus on conduct, not just company size, and we should also pair it with other policies like platform transparency, data portability, and stronger labor protections to make markets more accessible and open. In the end, this isn't just about tearing down successes, it's about making sure we're not stuck with just one version of the future. I'll hand it over to Shelby now to talk about the weaknesses.
Thanks, Maya. Let's start by examining how market concentration affects different groups. For consumers, the concern is higher prices and reduced innovation due to fewer competitive pressures. However, this isn't always clear-cut. Dominant platforms like Amazon often provide convenience, low prices, and vast selection, which consumers value. So the harm is real in some areas, but it's not universal. For workers, there's evidence that market power can suppress wages and reduce job mobility. Yet highly skilled workers and dominant firms may actually benefit, and broader trends like automation and globalization also play a role, which complicates the narrative even further. Investors, on the other hand, often benefit from concentrated markets due to higher profits and predictable returns. But excessive concentration could bring in long-term risks, especially regulatory backlash or as slower growth sets in. On to the next slide, we will look at society and regulation. Looking at the broader societal impact, dominant firms can lower tax contributions through global strategies and contribute to rising inequality by concentrating income and power. But not all of this stems from firm size. It can also result from outdated or weak policy frameworks. The DOJ's antitrust case against Google provides a useful lens. Google pays to be the default search engine on many devices, limiting competitions. Critics say that this locks in dominance, but Google argues that defaults reflects user preference and switching is easy. This highlights how difficult it is to distinguish dominance based on merit and anti-competitive behavior. On to the next slide, we will dive into if policy should respond. So, should we intervene? There is a case for it. Competition fuels innovation and fairness, and addressing abusive practices like exclusionary contracts or anti-labor behavior helps keep market dynamic. But we also need to be cautious. Not all bigness is harmful. Some dominance reflects efficiency. Instead of blunt force antitrust, we should focus on smarter policies like data transparency, platform neutrality, and stronger labor protections. Ultimately, the goal isn't to shrink successful firms, it's to make the market stay open, fair, and innovative. Daria is going to take it away with the impacts and strengths of market concentration.
Thank you, Shelby. In regards to consumers, the higher prices for advertisers and indirectly consumers due to alleged ad tech and search dominance, DOJ cases such as that with Google. Less choice and innovation in search due to alleged exclusive deals. But however, there's a counterpoint to that. Google often highlights user convenience and network effects as reasons for its popularity. In regards to workers, potential for suppressed wage growth and limited job creation due to reduced competition from Google's alleged dominance. And the caveat to that is increased inequality, high pay for some Google employees, but overall market effects may worsen wage disparities. In regards to investors, this is the group of individuals that benefit the most, and this is one of the main strengths. The benefit for Google's high profits and market power leading to predictable returns, significant regulatory risk for ongoing antitrust lawsuits, and in regard to citizens and society, potential impact on tax revenues due to multinational tax strategies of large tech firms like Google. And then in regards to political concerns, the power of dominant firms like Google to influence policy and regulation. So they have the power to really make a difference if they do decide to do that. And thank you for listening to our presentation.